Welcome to Open Thighs Friday on the Hard Starboard Radio Network. On blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network, I, of course, am as always your host, Jasmius, your ruler, your benevolent despot, your fountain rabbi of conservatism, constitutionalism, Christianity, and common sense. Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern and 3 p.m. Pacific. Guest call-in number 6464-785-068. Email address jasmius@comcast.net. Chat room is open, so feel free to file on in and prepare to be dazzled right out of your seats, as usual, in other words. And you might be asking, well, why do you sound like you have more of a spring in your step today? Well, how do I put this? Let's just say that I had something this morning that, would it be fair to call it a vision? Well, no, not quite, but that's the motif I'm going to use anyway. A vision of how the Saturday afternoon extravaganza, that being, of course, Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs, is going, at long last, to embark on its way to the big-time promised land. And possibly even Rush Limbaugh territory, before it's all said and done. And who knows how fast these things can go. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it can just happen overnight. You never know. Now, I don't want to go into any detail because, I mean, it's still all in front of us. It's still speculative. But see, the one thing that I will say, and I never mentioned this on the air before, and I don't think I have. And I've never mentioned it in, shall we say, off-the-air conversations, because I didn't want to be the source of any discouraging words. Because you got to remember, as far as Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs is concerned, I'm all the way up the coast, 1,200 miles away, really can't do anything on the spot or be of any help on the spot on anything. I'm basically doing all that I am able to do by providing consistent copy material for politicalpistachio.com and editing the books that Mr. Gibbs continues to churn out. There's 3 in counting, by the way. 25 Myths of the United States Constitution, the Basic Constitution. 25 Myths came out about 13 months ago. The Basic Constitution came out last September. Silenced Screams came out last month. Where was it? January. It might have been January. Anyway, all by Douglas V. Gibbs, available at createspace.com and amazon.com. And, of course, contributing to Constitution News Quarterly, which has been on the back burner for over a year now because there's just too much else going on. It's definitely taken a back seat to Tabletop News, the Uptown Coffee News for constitutionalists in the Southern California Inland Empire area, specifically Murrieta, Temecula, and Menifee, California. And you know what? I'm perfectly okay with that. Why? Because that will be the bedrock, basic living for Casa Gibbs, shall we say, the Gibbs clan. So, and boy, I mean, if anybody on the face of this planet understands the need to provide for the basic needs of their family, it's yours truly. And then, of course, keeping the lights on at American Daily Review, what has been for the past 3.5 plus years, the first 2 hours of the Saturday afternoon extravaganza, and then being a co-host and guest host on A Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs, the third hour of the Saturday afternoon extravaganza, as it has existed for the past 3.5 plus years. That's all I can do from all the way up the coast. If I were all the way down the coast, I'd be neck deep in all this stuff and very happy and pleased to do it. But then I'm happy and pleased to do anything I can for the cause that we all on Team Gibbs, those fighting under the banner of the flag of Gibbs, which I'm still trying to figure out. Now that that idea has been, that picture has been planted in my mind, I gotta start coming up with what that would look like. No, I'm not going to debase the United States flag, Old Glory, with even with a pleasing, ruggedly handsome visage in the ensign. I mean, or the field. Not going to do that. But I'll have to think of something. Not that it's a really high priority at the moment, because I got some irons in the fire too. I've got my daughter's upcoming recital down in Portland on April the 12th to think about, and I got some other things that I've been not dragging my feet on, just haven't gotten off my lazy keister and gotten them done. And then, of course, there's always watching my retirement nest egg slowly evaporate, which is always fun. Hopefully that won't be a concern for much longer if all goes per my vision, quote-unquote. Like I say, it's all speculative at this point, so it's still out in front of us, but the key thing is, and as I think I started to say earlier, when we were on KCAA the past 3.5 plus years, I could never see how we were going to get to where we wanted to go. Because we have been a small, a 1 hour per weekend program on a comparatively rinky-dink, small-time radio station. We've been on WKRP, the WKRP of Southern California, for all intents and purposes. And you keep hope alive. You dream of what you want to do, but I can never. And Mr. Gibbs has confirmed this from time to time. Never could quite see how we would get from there to where our ambitions were calling us, or from where to get from KCAA to the place from where our ambitions and dreams were calling us. But now, let's just say, I'll just throw this additional thought out there. Getting drummed from KCAA, and by the way, apparently they're starting to realize, oh boy, that might not be such a great thing for us. But, well, you know what? That's too bad for them. If they didn't want to be the flagship station, if they wanted to be the flagship station of the Political Pistachio Radio Network, then they should have thought of that before taking the actions that they have over the past week. But now, getting drummed from KCAA may have been a blessing in disguise, ladies and gentlemen. And KMET, Smart Talk 1490 AM, may just wind up the flagship station of the Political Pistachio Radio Network. So, in other words, to boil it all down to one well-known and time-worn but still descriptive phrase, there is now a visible light at the end of this exhaustively long tunnel. So, not only is hope alive, hope is renewed, hope is burgeoning, because we can finally see the end game, folks. Finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. I wouldn't say there's a timeline to it, but once, you know what, as I have been told about anything to do remotely with show business, whether it's movies, whether it's TV, whether it's radio, talk radio, once things start to happen, they can happen very, very fast. So we shall see how this process unfolds, but there just might be some very exciting times on the horizon for the members of Team Gibbs. Yes, indeed. And of course, at blogtalkradio.com/HSR network, almost 8 years worth of podcasts for you to choose from, and I would heartily recommend that you choose all of them. And over 5.5 years worth of podcasts at blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review. And yes, American Daily Review will air as it always does. 3 p.m. Eastern at noon Pacific tomorrow at blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review. And I haven't looked today, but while it's still there, go to kcaaradio.com, click on the Saturday button on the left-hand side of the page, find Mr. Gibbs's ruggedly handsome mug, click on the podcast link right below Mr. Gibbs's picture. That'll take you to the podcast page for Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs. Every podcast of the past 3.5+ years, all 200 episodes are there. Get them while you still can, folks. That's all I'm telling you. If you haven't gotten them by now, get them ASAP. And that will include all 9 of my guest hosting gigs. Would have been 10, but for G.R. Mobley last May. But, easy come, easy go. I know my place. I'm the XO. I'm not the captain of the Starship Pistachio. And you know what? I'm just fine with that. Know your role and shut your mouth, as The Rock used to say when he was part of the Nation of Domination. How long ago was that? Answer 1998, in case you were wondering. So get them while they're still there at kcaaradio.com. And who knows? I mean, once we get to the point where everything that Mr. Gibbs is doing is on one website, under one umbrella, including online, and that'll include politicalpistachio.com. That'll include podcast pages for all, for Hard Starboard Radio, for American Daily Review, for Constitution Study Radio, for Constitution Radio, Douglas V. Gibbs. Who knows? Maybe we'll get podcast pages for all of them, and Constitution Speaking. The public speaking, Constitution seminars, Constitution classes. Mr. Gibbs' burgeoning line of books, everything that he's doing, and that we on the team are assisting with. Hell, maybe even tabletop news. I don't know. Once all that is under the same umbrella, like I say, maybe all the podcasts will be there too. But that, of course, is for further down the line. The dream is in front of us. The good times are on the way, God willing. But in the meantime, we have some good times here on Open Thighs Friday. So why don't we get started? Oh, yes, don't want to forget our YouTube channel is youtube.com/hardstarboardradio, the home of the jazziest cam footage of the most listened to podcast each week. And a Blog Talk, here we go again. youtube.com/American Daily Review 2, the home of each Saturday afternoon extravaganza. Still haven't gotten the final one until the hiatus ends uploaded. But then they'll all be there. And so listen, watch, subscribe, learn it, live it, love it. And our profound gratitude to all of you who have done any or all of the three. Now, interestingly enough, today's Morning Jolt e-newsletter from Jim Garrity of National Review and Campaign Spot fame has both items or both topics in the stack today encapsulated. So we'll just share that in order to map out where we're going and what we'll be discussing today. And in order to do that, I must first play the Morning Jolt update theme. You know, I just thought of a good analogy for my own broadcasting fun and frivolity here on the Hard Starboard Radio Network, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and my co-hosting duties with Mr. Gibbs on American Daily Review, and of course Constitution Radio when it comes off of hiatus in a better place in a few weeks, hopefully. And it came to me during the Morning Jolt update theme. You know how there are individual standalone movie franchises for, you know, Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, and then, so in other words, solo gigs for Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, Robert Downey Jr., and then they all come together, you know, Avengers Assemble, and they all come together for the Avengers movies, right? And that struck me as being Hard Starboard Radio is kind of like my standalone franchise, my standalone program, and then Doug Gibbs has Constitution Study Radio, but then we come together for Constitution Radio. It's an American Daily Review. It's like Avengers Assemble, you know, Constitutionalists Assemble, you know. So I don't know. That seemed like a kind of in a Big Bang Theory sense. That sounded like kind of a cool analogy to make. Anyway, two primary topics today. The first one, in the words and in the headlining of Mr. Garrity, we won't have Harry Greed to kick around for much longer. Or I guess a better way to put it would be, we won't have Harry Greed kicking us around for much longer. Depends on how Republican you are, as opposed to conservative. Good riddance, declares Jade. Senator Harry Greed Senate Minority Leader, the tough tactician who has led Senate Democrats since 2005, will not seek re-election next year, bringing an end to a 3-decade congressional career that culminated with his push of Barack Obama's ambitious agenda against this. I didn't think I could get through this phrase without breaking out laughing. Against fierce Republican resistance. Well, I guess no Republican voted for Obamacare, but then that didn't really matter a hill of beans anyway at the time. Now that Republicans do have the numbers, they're just not. I mean, some Republicans resist, but not all of them, and it ain't fierce. So, fierce Republican resistance. Sorry. Well, I know Tea Partiers are hee-hawing out there, but... And that's most of my audience, isn't it? Now, that is a fantastic open seat opportunity for Republicans who mopped the floor with Democrats in the 2014 elections in Nevada. And it's really good news for Senator Brian Sandoval. I mean, Governor Brian Sandoval. I mean, for now. That's one of the topics. That's the first hour topic. And then in hour number 2, just when you thought the Iran deal couldn't get worse. No. 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 No! The President of the United States does not get to unilaterally consign us and our closest ally in the Middle East into a doomed future of trying to placate nuclear-armed apocalyptic Iranian mullahs. Well, actually, yeah, he does, just not legally or constitutionally. Remember, one of Barack Obama's legacies, power severed from legal authority. Never forget that. The deal seems to get worse every day. At this point, our only hope is that it gets so bad that our allies who are closer to Iran can't go along with it, and Obama is left signing a deal that Great Britain, France, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, and the rest can't accept. And what would that say about our president? That might make the deal more obvious for what it is. Presidential permission slip to assemble the material for an entire nuclear arsenal, which, again, I'm convinced that the Iranians already have it, but anyway. As long as they don't assemble the... Well, why would they stop there? And make it effectively expire... Well, no, actually, it's never going to expire, is it? If the centrifuges are not for weapons purposes, why does Iran need to keep them in a fortified bunker protected from Israeli airstrikes? The United States is considering letting Tehran run hundreds of centrifuges at a once secret fortified underground bunker in exchange for limits on on centrifuge work and research and development at other sites, officials have told the Associated Press. The trade-off? Trade-off. How is it a trade-off if everything's going in one direction? The trade-off would allow Iran to run several hundred of the devices at its Fordo facility, although the Iranians would not be allowed. As if. To do work that could lead to nuclear weapons, and the site would be subject to international inspection. Yeah, those have been real effective. International inspectors get to inspect only where the Iranians allow them to, not where they need to. But there was... I mean, at this point, what purpose would there really be for international inspections if they're being allowed to do whatever they want anyway? What would they be inspecting for? To keep track of the mullahs' nuclear weapons progress? Well, the arsenal's up to 50 warheads, 100, 150, who knows? The sky's the limit, right? I'm sure I bet that term will be verbatim in the agreement. The sky's the limit. According to Western officials familiar with details of negotiations now underway. In return, Iran would be required to scale back the number of centrifuges it runs at its Natanz facility and accept other restrictions on nuclear-related work altogether now. Sure they will. Instead of uranium, which can be enriched to be the fissile core of nuclear warheads, any centrifuges permitted at Fordo would be fed elements such as zinc, xenon, and germanium for separating out isotopes used in medicine, industry, or science, the official said. And how would this be enforced? Oh hell, this would be a dog and pony show, man. This would be for Western consumption, and meanwhile, up would go the Iranian nuclear arsenal to the sky. Number of centrifuges would not be enough to produce the amount of uranium needed to produce a why do they keep talking about a weapon, a bomb? Like in singular. Within a year, the minimum time frame that Washington and its negotiating partners demand. Oh, they're demanding that the mullahs don't nuke us in Israel for a year. Well, that's tough negotiating, isn't it? Tough diplomacy. Sorry for those of you watching the Jasmine cam. I tried to cross my eyes, but these days I can barely get my eyes to focus, so I don't want to push them that far. You know, we were assured the deal would be contingent upon full Iranian cooperation with inspections, and, well, now, actually, maybe not. God. Under the new plan, Tehran would not be expected to immediately clarify all the outstanding questions raised by the International Atomic Energy Agency in a 2011 report on Iran's secretive work. There's nothing alleged about it. A full reckoning of Iran's past activities would be demanded in later years. Sure they would. As part of a nuclear deal that is expected to last at least 15 years. Good Lord, would any of us still be alive 15 years from now? At the rate this thing is going? Remember, all it would take is one nuclear warhead exploded 300 miles above Kansas. Bam, the entire U.S. electrical grid is fried for good. Ladies and gentlemen, fried for good. And who's going to come to our rescue? Who's going to be the United States for us? Once we're taken out, all it would take, one warhead. It's called an electromagnetic pulse attack. Who would help us? Who would bail us out? The current, you want to talk about one warhead? There you go. If the mullahs only had one warhead, isn't that how they would use it? That's what I would do if I were them. Current plan is that we're going to let Iran enrich uranium from a fortified underground bunker. If this is the compromise, what did we talk them down from? Letting them build a nuclear facility in Manhattan to save on shipping costs? Nice. Oh, man, I tell you, gallows humor is a cottage industry today. Bloody Harry Reid update theme. Harry Reid will not be seeking re-election in 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, or you could put it this way: "O ye of little faith, why do you doubt your party's chances of taking back the Senate next year?" Nevada Senator Harry Reid has announced that he will not seek re-election in 2016, saying that he wants to leave the Senate while he's still going strong. I want to be able to go out at the top of my game, Reid told the New York Times. I don't want to be a 42-year-old trying to become a designated hitter. That's an interesting analogy, no? What does at the top of my game mean in a senatorial context? Since physical condition, beyond simply not being physically incapacitated, doesn't seem to enter into that equation, we can only conclude that he means at the top of my mental game. Might this be an implicit concession that he might be in the early stages of dementia or Alzheimer's? I mean, there have been rumors to that effect, after all. He's had at least one stroke, maybe more. The concern may be that if he does have either of those conditions, dementia or Alzheimer's, or has another stroke, he may not make it through another 6-year term, and currently at least, Nevada has a Republican governor who would be the aforementioned Brian Sandoval, who would appoint Reid's replacement to serve out the remainder of that term. So why not bow out now and give a viable Nevada Democrat a clear shot at holding on to that seat in what is bound to be a better year for Democrats as a whole? That's Ramesh Ponnur's conclusion in National Review. Quote, Ramesh Ponnuru of National Review said that the statement may shed more light on his decision than perhaps he intended. Ponnuru contends that getting a new Democrat elected will take money too, of course. And if it would take more money to get the incumbent re-elected, doesn't that tell us something about his standing in the state? And you know what, folks? Not only Dirty Harry's re-election either. This is from the Washington Post. The fundraising group for Senate Republicans predicts that Reid's seat will be an easy pickup for the GOP. Not only does Reid instantly become irrelevant and a lame duck, he won't be irrelevant, I guarantee you that much. He's still running the Senate, remember? His retirement signals that there is no hope for the Democrats to regain control of the Senate, the National Republican Senatorial Committee said. With the exception of Reid, every elected statewide official in Nevada is Republican, and this race is the top pickup opportunity for the GOP. End of quote. I don't know about no hope. The Republicans have at least 4 vulnerable blue state seats. Mark Kirk in Illinois, Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, Ron Johnson in Wisconsin, Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire. And those seats are likely to come home next year. But pickup opportunities like Nevada and Michael Bennett's seat in Colorado at least give the GOP a chance to cling precariously to some margin of Senate majority, although what value that majority is open to vigorous and rancorous debate. But if Senator Pencilneck was any kind of favorite to win next year, and remember, in his 5 previous victories, only once did he exceed 51% of the vote, well then, he'd already be off and running to try to secure a 6th term. But then maybe it's simply that the game has become too easy for him. Remember that when the Democrats are in the majority, they run the Senate. And when the Republicans are in the majority, the Democrats run the Senate. Last month's DHS appropriation fiasco proved that for all time. So for Harry Reid, perhaps there's just no more fun to be had in legislative confrontations and showdowns and wars that never materialize. It's like the skipper arm wrestling Gilligan. It's like sport fishing with power saws. Maybe Harry Reid is just plain bored. But he couldn't resist one final bitch slap of his hapless counterpart. In a farewell message that he put on YouTube, Senator Reid told his successor as Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, Republican of Kentucky, not to be too elated, adding that he's going to be here for 22 months, and you know what I'm going to be doing. The same thing I've done since I first came to the Senate. Yeah. Treating Mitchie the Campbell Soup Kid like the captured Islamic State harem girl he is. And, of course, running the United States Senate. But seeing as though Dirty Harry's chief leadership trait is being a ruthless, hyper-partisan son of a bitch, it's not as though Chucky Schumer or Ali Dickbar al-Durbini can't take over for him without missing a beat. And by the way, it is confirmed, or at least it looks confirmed, that Chucky Schumer of New York will be the next Senate Democrat leader, because that is who Dirty Harry publicly endorsed to be his successor this afternoon. So, take that for what you will. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, right? I don't know. This Kevin Williamson piece, it was from last June, and you'll be able to tell from the references to the different partisan alignment in the Senate. But this, let's see. I'm taking a look here to see if I realistically have time to go through it. It'd be fun. That's for certain. Maybe I'll come back to it if there's time at the end of the show, but I want to get to National Review and its take on the Greed retirement real quick. Harry Greed, a boxer and a brawler, is throwing in the towel. Good riddance. There is no gentle way to characterize Senator Greed's career. He is, and long has been, one of the worst things about American government. A self-interested, dishonest, sanctimonious, unscrupulous, corrupt charlatan who began his career with an act of cheap theater, choking Jack Gordon, who had offered him a bribe for the benefit of the FBI's cameras, and capped it by filibustering a bill intended to help people being held as slaves because it did not allow for shunting public money into the coffers of Planned Parenthood for subsidized abortions, a stunt he pulled after boasting of his pro-life voting record. He's grown wealthy in office and made fortuitous investments in real estate that later benefited from federal projects. He used campaign funds as a family slush fund, channeling money to his granddaughter, hence one of my nicknames for him, Harry Greed, and taking dubious steps to conceal the fact, omitting her surname from official documents, all while posing as a champion of campaign finance reform. He invested an extraordinary amount of time and effort, including speeches from the Senate floor, denouncing two private citizens, that would be the Koch brothers, for their philanthropic and political donations. He flat out lied when it suited him, for example, announcing during the 2012 campaign that Mitt Romney hadn't paid any taxes in 10 years, a complete and utter fabrication that is, unfortunately, the sort of thing in which Greed has been all too happy to traffic. He's a longtime friend of Harvey Whitmore, the Reno businessman and lawyer whose firm has employed all of Greed's sons at one time or another. Oh, nepotism, it's a wonderful thing. And who was convicted of 3 felonies and sentenced to prison for evading campaign finance laws to funnel money into Greed's re-election campaign. Later, Greed had the audacity to call it campaign finance reform when he attempted to gut the First Amendment and got every Senate Democrat to vote with him so that independent political groups could be stifled with speech restrictions in the interest of protecting Democrats. When he was majority leader, Greed used the power of his position to stall effectively all significant legislation coming out of the Republican-controlled House and cynically complained about obstructionists while acting as Washington's obstructionist-in-chief. Or Obama's obstructionist-in-chief. He bears a great deal of responsibility for the mess that is Obamacare, for the shocking waste of the stimulus package, for the unprecedented deficits produced by his joint congressional leadership with crazy Nancy Pelosi, and I suppose John Boehner to an extent, and for the undermining of U.S. policy in the Middle East when sabotage suited him. Boy, did he do that frequently and promiscuously. He has been as near to a personification of everything that is wrong with American public life as we ever hoped to see, and he would have remained in the Senate as long as he wanted to be there. From a state that has otherwise gone totally red. Republican, in other words. Ah, the impregnable power of incumbency, huh? At least when you're a Democrat. His retirement announcement leaves only one thing to be lamented, that Nevadans will be denied the opportunity to finally discover sufficient reserves of self-respect to defeat him at the ballot box, although I really kind of doubt that they would have. I mean, if ever that was going to happen, it would have been in 2010. It didn't happen then, did it? Not that I recollect. Now, true, he was going against a not ready for primetime Tea Party hack, but not to knock Sharon Angle. She was a nice lady, but she wasn't ready for that level. You know, she hadn't run anything. She hadn't been in Congress. She hadn't done. She just was not ready. She'd been a state representative, and even now, sometimes state representatives, state senators can make the big leap to the United States Senate. But in 2010 would have been the year that was accomplished, if it was ever going to be accomplished in Nevada against the then Senate Majority Leader. But, well, it didn't happen. So what reason would there be to think that in 2016, which is bound to be a better year for Democrats than 2014 was, that Harry Reid wouldn't have been reelected to a sixth term? I don't know. Maybe I'm still. I still got 2008 and 2012 cynicism hangover, but I'm not all the way back to being. I'm nowhere near being back to being confident in any slice of the American electorate outside of maybe Texas or Utah or Idaho. Oh, wait a minute! Isn't Bo Bergdahl from Idaho? Oh, never mind. And not Alaska. I mean, look what the Democrats did to Sarah Palin up there a number of years ago. At any rate, as Harry Reid leaves government, we wish him good health and long life. I mean, we don't want any... We're not like Democrats. We don't hope that our opponents die like they do. I don't want anything to... It's like I say about every Democrat. Every last one of them. I don't want anything to happen to them. I don't want them to get sick. I don't want them to die. I don't want horrible things to happen to them other than, being imprisoned if their actions have merited that particular fate. Good health, long life. I just want to get them away from the levers of power. That's all I care about. Let them be the cranks, the people who sit on park benches muttering to themselves about all the things they do if they had power. In Harry Reid's case, that actually became true. But Harry Reid being out of government might give him the opportunity to reflect on his career in politics and perhaps to find a way to atone for it. The only problem with that is he has absolutely and positively no inclination to do so. But other than that, he'll slither off into the sunset, and all we can say here, folks, is we are definitely not wild about Harry, except seeing the door hit him in his scrawny ass on the way out the door. We'll be back. Final hour of the week, heading into the weekend, where, of course, it'll be just limited to American Daily Review, 2 hours tomorrow, starting at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, at blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review. Barring a miracle, no Constitution Radio tomorrow on KCAA. As I discussed in the opening monologue, and those of you who weren't here for it, well, that's why you need to tune in for the whole show, not just part of it. Behind-the-scenes events are taking us away from KCAA, quite possibly, quite likely, over to KMET 1490 AM, the Smart Talk station. In a few weeks, nothing. It's everything's so speculative at this point, but it's looking very good that not only will we have a new home at KMET, but that is laid out, that has opened up what is a viable and visible path to getting where we want to go. Like I say, I could, and we're talking more than just an hour or two on the weekend. We're talking like possibly, potentially, morning drive, Monday through Friday. And the possibilities for a self-created actual. You know what I mentioned, the Political Pistachio Radio Network. We're talking an actual bona fide Political Pistachio Radio Network. So, I mean, the possibilities, it's all speculative, but the path is now visible as to how we get from point A to point B. So, but for tomorrow, just American Daily Review, starting 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific at blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review. Now we turn back to Barack Obama's Middle East policy, and the question really is, does Yemen mark the final collapse of Obama's Middle Eastern policy, or is it the triumph of Obama's Middle East policy? Well, it all depends on what you think Barack Obama's actual Middle East policy was, doesn't it? Tom Rogan argues for collapse. I argue for triumph, because I think Barack Obama I think everything that is happening in the Middle East and has happened in the Middle East over the last few years has been per Barack Obama's objectives. Everything. I'm not saying master plan, but I'm saying everything that he wanted to do. Withdraw American influence in the Middle East, cultivate Iran as the new hegemon of the Middle East, screw Israel, spread jihadism across the entire region. Well, it's been largely accomplished, hasn't it? Yemen's just the latest example. From an American standpoint, Barack Obama has left the United States with few military options and little influence over allies or regional actors. Astounding. That was how ABC-CCP News' John Carl reacted yesterday to Josh Earnest's assertion. I must have missed this one. Josh Earnest, of course, the White House spokesjerk. He asserted yesterday that Yemen, and I swear I am not making, I know it sounds like Dave Barry. I swear I'm not making this up. I swear I'm not making this up, folks. This is a verbatim quote. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest said yesterday at the Daily White House Press Briefing that Yemen remains a model for counter-terrorism. Let me repeat that. White House White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest asserted yesterday that Yemen remains a model for counter-terrorism. If you have ABC News' White House correspondent just with his jaw on the ground in incredulity. Wow, that's quite an accomplishment right there. I mean, in fact, Jonathan Carl, or John Carl, ABCCCP News, was so astounded he asked Ernest to clarify. In other words, he couldn't believe what he was hearing. And the White House spokesjerk dutifully responded, quote, "What the United States will do and has done is work to try to support the central government, build up the capacity of local fighters, and use our own technological and military capabilities to apply pressure on the extremists there." You mean all the ones that we have withdrawn in an embarrassing pell-mell retreat? Including, if you've been watching and reading politicalpistachio.com, as I posted the other day, we left over $500 million worth of military equipment in Yemen. We left it all behind. Over $500 million worth of equipment, including helicopters, including fast attack boats, ammunition and small arms. We left it all behind. So there's nobody left in Yemen to apply pressure on the extremists there. And we left all the equipment behind anyway. So even if we did have troops, or advisors, sorry, in Yemen, they wouldn't have any equipment. We gave it all away. We gave it all away to the Iranians and to the Islamic State. And Al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula, of course. I don't know how they're going to divvy that up, but... Oh, boy. Amazing, huh? Amazing the totalitarian mindset when they don't quite yet have the power to make everybody say, yes, sir, I'd like some more. There are a few problems with this strategy. That's a droll way to put it. First, Yemen's central government no longer exists. Second, Yemen's local fighters are divided between the Iranian-controlled Houthi rebels, Al-Qaeda, the Arabian Peninsula, and the Islamic State. Third, with the CIA and Obama gone, having evacuated Yemen, as I just pointed out, ground-level U.S. military capabilities are almost non-existent. But other than that, it's a model strategy for counterterrorism. Moreover, Yemen is now a regional war zone. Oh, yeah. The Saudis are now militarily... They're massing 150,000 troops on the border with Yemen. They have taken control of Yemeni airspace. We're building up toward... I talked about this yesterday on Hard Starboard Radio. We're building up toward a regional war in the Middle East between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And if you look at a map of the Middle East and you look at where Saudi Arabia is, to the north of Yemen, to the south of Iraq, both countries controlled by the Islamic Empire of Iran. So the Saudis are starting to feel, shall we say, boxed in, surrounded. So now they're not letting any more moss, as it were, gather under their feet. They're acting to prevent the second pincher from being put into place. After all, a coalition of Sunni governments is now pursuing Operation Storm of Resolve, a title perhaps designed to repudiate Barack Obama's steady resolve strategy. Man, nobody overseas takes this guy seriously, but he still thinks they do. His ego won't permit any other conclusion. To restore Yemen's deposed president, Mansour Hadi, who has now fled the country, by the way. He was in Aden, that's the site, by the way, of the Al-Qaeda attack on the USS Cole almost 15 years ago. That's in the southwest corner of the country of Yemen. And now, of course, President Hadi has now fled the country altogether, so that's going to be a bigger task to accomplish. To be sure, a movement of regional actors to check the Iranian-supported Houthi rebels seems positive, but there's one problem. Beyond intelligence and logistics support, America isn't involved. And really, we're not even much involved in terms of intelligence and logistics either, to be quite couth and frank. And that means the United States will have little influence over what the Sunni alliance actually does in Yemen. And that leads to another problem. Because while U.S. interests in Yemen center on restraining al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and now the Islamic State, the Sunni governments are fixated on Iran. You know, like we should be. Well, I mean, Obama is fixated on Iran. He's fixated on turning them into the hegemon of the Middle East. The nuclear hegemon, I might add. The Sunni governments are fixated on Iran in terms of stopping them, opposing them. As has been explained here before, terrified by Iran's growing influence, the Sunni governments are rolling the dice because they really don't have any other option. In turn, with Iran promising to counter the Sunni military operations, the risk of a wider military conflagration in the region is significant. Or as I said yesterday, smart power! America's absence, and that's the key phrase here, America's absence makes it far more likely that the Sunni monarchies will restore de facto alliances with Salafi jihadist groups and pursue policies that exacerbate the socio-political conditions that have helped Yemen become a breeding ground for jihadism. Smart power. This growing chaos only underlines the ultimate truth of American policy in the Middle East, and that is that it has been designed to, from the American point of view, fail. It was supposed to, from the American point of view, fail. It is a total success from Barack Obama's point of view. The truth is that U.S., which is to say American policy success, isn't measured solely by what actors do, but also by what they don't do. Having essentially ceded Iraq to Iran in pursuit of his nuclear deal and ignored allies' concerns about that deal, Barack Obama has greatly weakened his regional influence. But then he doesn't need regional influence. That's what Iran is for, right? And U.S. allies are detaching their policies from American interests, which is another one of Obama's objectives. Because remember, American involvement in anything on the world stage is by definition bad. America is arrogant. America is greedy. America is warmongering. America tries to force its beliefs on everybody else. America is the focus of evil in the modern world. That's what Barack Obama believes. Why do you think that he said, and I keep pointing this out because it's so applicable across virtually the gamut of domestic and foreign policy issues. He said that his legacy would be an America reduced to the level of the rest of the world. Well, an America reduced to the level of the rest of the world can't influence or project power in the world, can it? Who are we to tell the Sunni alliance what to do vis-a-vis Iran? Who are we to tell the mullahs they can't have nuclear weapons? Especially since Israel does. The Jews have them, so why shouldn't the Muslims have them too? After all, that would only be fair. That's how Barack Obama thinks. That's how the American left thinks. That's their mindset, folks. So do you really think that Barack Obama had an American foreign policy that failed, or did he have an anti-American foreign policy that has wildly succeeded? With the nuclear arms race in the Middle East looming, the consequences of this detachment of our one-time Sunni allies, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, etc., are potentially catastrophic. And to understand why, you just have to ask yourself this question. You have to ask yourself this question. How would we get back in? Who would listen to us? You know, these are relationships that are built, have been built over decades. And now it takes a long time to build up, no time at all to throw away. But then, how much more time and effort would it take to rebuild those relationships? And in the meantime, well, frankly, we don't have that kind of time! I mean, you could almost say that if Barack Obama does leave power when he's constitutionally required to at noon Eastern Standard Time, January the 20th, 2017, he is locking into place a foreign policy situation in which a Republican successor will not be able to do anything that Barack Obama doesn't want America to do, foreign policy-wise. A President Walker will not be able to project power. The Navy's been gutted, after all, remember? And we won't have allies pretty much anywhere because they trusted us and we just screwed them. We just rammed it up their you-know-what sideways. They're not going to listen to us. And their interests will already be detached. I mean, how would we go about reattaching their interest to ours? Who's going to follow American leadership now that American leadership has been disgraced, made a laughingstock? Yet, led by foreign policy luminaries like Susan Rice, Ben Rhodes, and Valerie Jarrett. Did she really have the nickname the Oracle? Yeah, the White House troll. Obama is confident. Obama is confident. Well, that's a relief. Obama is confident that his detachment is good strategy. Corresponding, well, it is for his ultimate objectives, which are anti-American. Correspondingly, Josh Earnest's comments yesterday weren't a symptom of political spin, but rather a signifier of immense delusion. Well, no, not delusion. Hardcore anti-Americanism. Learn the difference, Mr. Rogan. The White House genuinely believes that Middle Eastern stability is best served by American absence, withdrawal, hesitation, abstinence. Reality begs to disagree, but then you have to remember which side Barack Obama's on. Barack Obama to Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. I love you. I honestly love you. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei to Barack Obama. Death to America! About sums it up, doesn't it? But DeRoy Murdoch felt compelled to expound upon the subject. Iran's tentacles of destruction dim confidence in a nuclear arms deal. Death to America! Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei told a screaming crowd in Tehran last Saturday. No, tomorrow. Of course, they were chanting, Death to America! Right back. The politics of America is to create insecurity! Well, that's not entirely inaccurate. It's just insecurity here. Another success for Barack Hussein Obama. With U.S.-Iranian nuclear weapons talks in full swing, Khamenei's crack was not exactly what diplomats call a confidence-building measure. Of course, Khamenei offered no olive branch, realizing that Obama is desperate for any deal to have that piece of paper to wave around like an idiot debarking from Air Force One. Even one so flimsy that White House Chief of Staff Denis McDonough, that's spelled D-E-N-I-S, so that's pronounced Denis, as far as I know. White House Chief of Staff Denis McDonough admits it's a non-binding agreement, which is meaningless, because Barack Obama's going to bind us to it, regardless of the law, regardless of the Constitution, regardless of the Senate's advice and consent function. Doesn't matter. He's going to bind us to it anyway. Khamenei can say whatever he wants. Obama will keep begging for the mullahs to sign a piece of paper that he will probably slip past Congress and send to the United Nations for approval. The Constitution be damned. Far scarier than Khamenei's words are Iran's actions, which actually kind of live up to the words. Its long record of support for Islamic terrorism demonstrates why it cannot be trusted to comply with anything its leaders endorse, no matter how favorable to them it is. During his March 2nd AIPAC speech, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu presented a map showing how Iran envelops the entire world with its tentacles of terror. That chart offers a chilling guide to Obama's partners in nuclear non-proliferation. And, oh wow, it's all of Europe, Turkey, the former South Asian republics of the Soviet Union, the stands. Thailand, India, Kenya, South Africa, Peru, Argentina, and of course the United States. Yeah, it's quite a large footprint for, shall we say, projecting Iranian power. The State Department has designated Iran, State Department had designated Iran an official state sponsor of terrorism since 1984. The State Department has now taken Iran off that list in the hopes of reaching an agreement. A historic agreement! Don't forget. With Iran's help, Representative Chris Stewart, Utah Republican, recently explained in the Wall Street Journal, Hezbollah has stockpiled about 60,000 surface-to-surface missiles in Lebanon, while Hamas has stockpiled about 10,000 surface-to-surface missiles in Gaza, all for the stated purpose of wiping Israel off the face of the earth. Not in a manner of speaking, not metaphorically, but as heart attack serious fact. It's 70,000 surface-to-surface missiles. 70,000. But Benjamin Netanyahu's the warmonger, right? Jordan disrupted an 8-member Iranian-backed cell last August and had planned to attack the Israeli embassy and American soldiers in Amman, Jordan, the capital. In July 2012, 2 Hezbollah terrorists detonated a bomb in Burgas, Bulgaria. It killed a local bus driver and 5 Israeli tourists and wounded 32 others. French officials that same month arrested Hossam Taleb Yacoub, a Hezbollah terrorist who had conducted surveillance of Israeli tourists in Cyprus. He was nabbed while acting as a courier in Europe for the Iranian-backed militant Islamic group. 5 Iranian agents in 2012 tried to assassinate Israeli diplomats in Thailand using magnetic sticky bombs that attached to vehicles. You know, kind of like the one that the Winter Soldier used to almost take out Nick Fury in Captain America, the Winter Soldier. You know, that probably maybe it might have been magnetic, but it had the same effect. Peruvian authorities in October 2014 arrested a Hezbollah terrorist in Lima, Peru, on suspicion of planning attacks on Israeli and Jewish targets. Iranian agents in Washington, D.C. were poised to assassinate Saudi Arabia's ambassador to the United States in October 2011. American officials said the disrupted conspiracy would have included attacks on the Saudi and Israeli embassies in Washington. According to former Congressman Mike Rogers, Michigan Republican, then chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, the quickness of the decisions that were made in order for certain elements of this to fall into place tells us that it is clearly tied to the highest levels of the Iranian government. As Netanyahu told AIPAC, this is what Iran is doing now without nuclear weapons. Imagine what Iran would do with nuclear weapons. Well, I've already told you that. EMP attack, 300 miles over Kansas, boom. America technologically recedes a century and a half. Within a year, 90% of the American population is dead. Because nobody's coming to our rescue. To prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons, which I think is the horse has already escaped the barn on that one, hitting the pause button on its radioactive R&D will not suffice. Its uranium enrichment efforts must stop. Gee, that would be nice, I guess. They couldn't build any more of them in that instance. All of its enrichment centrifuges must be boxed up and shipped somewhere safe, like the moon. To verify this, trustworthy international inspectors must be given full access to all sites. Boy, we are really getting into fantasy territory here, aren't we? This is the same deal that the late Muammar Gaddafi got when he surrendered Libya's nuclear weapons program in 2003. Oh, gee, who was president then? It'll come to me. Yeah, well, you know the guy. The cowboy warmonger who disarmed the Libyans of nuclear weapons preemptively. And why was he prompted to do that? Well, he just had a front row seat to what happened to Saddam Hussein in Iraq. A time at which the Iranian mullahs were absolutely pissing their robes in fear that we were going to do the same thing to them, which is exactly why we should have done that. And when we talk about letting the Iranians get nuclear weapons, believe it or not, Barack Obama is not entirely to blame. Maybe 95%. He's not entirely to blame because, President Bush, 43, George W. Bush, he had a small hand in letting it get to the point where he handed it off to Barack Obama, and then he's given away the store. By the way, the contents, the implements of Gaddafi's nuclear weapons program remain moldering at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee. If the Ayatollahs don't like these terms, then squeeze their turbans with paralytic economic sanctions, or even more to the point, just blow their turbans to merry hell and overthrow their regime and be done with it. Oh, yeah, that's right. We don't have the military capability to do that anymore. So that option's not going to be available for a President Walker either, assuming there ever is one. Obama may be unwilling or unable to make such demand. No, else unwilling. Not unable, unwilling. Trust me, Mr. Murdoch. And it's not a question of... He has a spine, it's just the wrong one. But he must remember this, Mr. Murdoch writes and concludes. The idea here is to prevent Jerusalem, London, and Washington from being decorated with mushroom clouds. Whereas, of course, that is Barack Obama's objective. Well, Barack Obama blatantly interfered and meddled in Israeli domestic politics, tried to overthrow Benjamin Netanyahu from his premiership, put a more pliable left-wing leader in that post who would follow Obama's orders to have his country, the nation of Israel, commit national suicide. And that effort was unsuccessful. And Bibi used tactics the left uses all the time, but the right, conservatives aren't supposed to use. It's apparently a proprietary thing. But then, of course, the left is never supposed to lose elections either. That's an article of faith on the left, too. If conservatives, if the right wins an election, any election, it's automatically illegitimate because the right won, as opposed to the left. Only left-wing victories or and elections in which the left wins, only they are legitimate. Any election that the left doesn't win, in any, regardless of the country, illegitimate by definition. But of course, Netanyahu won, so that just royally pissed off Barack Obama. And Barack Obama and his minions have been calling Benjamin Netanyahu chicken bleep and just they've hated his guts. Obama's hated Netanyahu's guts since at least 2011, when Netanyahu schooled him on why Israel can't withdraw to the indefensible 1967 borders. And then remember, after that, he went down to the West Wing and just blistered then White House Chief of Staff Bill Daley with an F-bomb-laden tirade because he'd been shown up by Mr. Netanyahu. Well, and now we've seen his attempt to overthrow Netanyahu failed, so now he moved on to, we're going to cut. In fact, they cut Israel out of the, even in advising Israel of what's going on in the nuclear negotiations with the mullahs. They've been cut out of that. And then Obama announced that he was going to cut Israel out of the peace process, negotiate only with Hamas, and then whatever they came up with, whatever they concocted, they force on Israel as a fait accompli. Then he threatened to withdraw U.S. support for Israel in the United Nations. So we're talking full-bore betrayal, perfidy, throwing them overboard, declaring an alliance with Iran against Israel. I mean, we're not far from that point. And the latest thing that the Obama regime has done, exposing Israel's nuclear program, thus giving our new Iranian friends the arsenal target they need to surpass, assuming again that they haven't already surpassed ours, much less Israel's, and telling them precisely where to aim their warheads. Gee, thanks, Barry. I'm sure the Ayatollah appreciates it. U.S. government, this is from Newsmax, the U.S. government has chosen to declassify a top-secret document that pulls the lid off Israel's nuclear weapons program. According to Israel National News, the document, written in 1987, was released in early February last month. It is believed to be the first time the U.S. has publicly acknowledged Israel has nuclear weapons. Which, to be fair, is one of the worst-kept secrets on the planet. And really, if you were the Jews with their ethnic and national history of diaspora and persecution and pogroms and near genocide, surrounded by over 1 billion bloodthirsty Muslim enemies, would you hammer your swords into plowshares and your spears into pruning hooks? And yet, with a 30-year head start on the mullahs in the Middle East nuclear arms race, Israel has never, not once in all that time, engaged in a single act of strategic preemption. There's a lesson in that, if only Barack Obama was willing to learn it. The 386-page document provides a detailed breakdown of how Israel developed nuclear weapons in the 1970s and 1980s. You know, just in case the mullahs still needed any tips or shortcuts. Kind of like copying the test answers from the smart kid in the next desk over. Israel is developing the kind of codes which will enable them to make hydrogen bombs. That is, codes which detail fission and fusion processes on a microscopic and macroscopic level, reads the report, called Critical Technological Assessment in Israel and NATO Nations. The document, paraphrases Israel National News, says Israel was reaching the ability to create bombs considered 1,000 times more powerful than atom bombs by the 1980s. Now that's up to 20 megatons per warhead. That would be a nice message to send to the mullahs, who can't go overboard on the overkill with all their nukes since Israel is not that big. And they would, presumably, want to avoid collateral and fallout damage to the Dar al-Islam, the abode of peace, in other words, Muslim-controlled territories. Which, come to think of it, may be the only factor holding back the Iranian nuclear onslaught Barack Obama is doing his damnedest to facilitate. The document also says Israel's nuclear research laboratories are equivalent to the United States' Los Alamos, Lawrence Livermore, and Oak Ridge National Laboratories. As far as nuclear technology is concerned, the Israelis are roughly, now this was in 1987, the Israelis are roughly where the United States was in the fission weapon field in about 1955 to 1960, or about 25, 30 years behind us. Of course, you know the immediate reason why the White House leaked this information, right? Give up? To bring the Israeli nuclear program into the same international negotiations framework as that of the mullahs. A treacherous quid pro quo. If Prime Minister Netanyahu wants the Iranians to give up their nukes, Israel has to reciprocate. First. Very soon now, ladies and gentlemen, the international community, quote unquote, led by Barack Hussein Obama, will be demanding unilateral nuclear disarmament from Israel, while the Iranian nuclear weapons arsenal will be completely forgotten, which will be nicely facilitated by the unconditional surrender deal the Obama regime will conclude with Tehran in a matter of days, if not hours. One more time, folks. I'll ask it again. Is there anybody out there who still believes that Barack Obama is incompetent? I wanted to get this in rather than taking, endlessly enjoyable and fun shots, ball shots at Dirty Harry Reid. As fun as that is, this is more important. Have you ever heard of Operation Jade Helm? Well, you're going to be hearing about it. Now, I'm not a conspiracist by both rule and temperament, folks. I've never bought into the whole Bilderberger, Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, Illuminati spiel, stuff, whatever. Not least reason of which is because it is flagrantly anti-Semitic, but primarily because it offends my highly developed sense of rationality and Vulcan logic. Just raising my Spock eyebrow for the Jasnius cam. To wit, conspiracies are not only the least efficient means of accomplishing anything. I mean, if keeping the whole thing secret is such an imperative, but you have to enlist the assistance and cooperation of dozens or hundreds or thousands of individuals, all with mouths and brains and internet access. But in the times in which we live now, they're not even necessary, conspiracies that is, because the hoi polloi are so corrupted and ignorant that everything the would-be conspiracist needs done can be carried out in full public view, and any onlookers will follow their brainwashed programming and disbelieve their lying eyes. Which segues right into this massive multi-state illegal domestic military training drill known as Operation Jade Helm. There's the quote from the London Daily Mail. Notice how we got to go overseas to find out what's going on in our own country? 7 southwestern U.S. states will soon be infiltrated by 1,200 military special ops personnel as part of a controversial domestic military training in which some of the elite soldiers will operate undetected among civilians. Operation Jade Helm begins in July and will last for 8 weeks. Soldiers will operate in and around towns in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah, and Colorado, where some of them will drop from planes while carrying weapons loaded with blanks in what military officials have dubbed realistic military training. That's domestically. Here at home, among their fellow American citizens, as if we were the enemy. Which, as far as the Obama regime is concerned, we are. Posse Comitatus Act, anyone? Or is this another of those obscure liberty-preserving statutes that are only applicable to Republicans and not Democrats? Like the Logan Act that Senator Tom Cotton and his 46 Republican colleagues supposedly ran afoul of. Operation Jade Helm will bring a coalition of forces, including the Green Berets, SEALs, and Special Operations Commands from the Air Force and Marines, to Texas for 2 months of realistic military training in a simulated hostile territory. Texas, and it doesn't seem like so much of a simulation from the White House point of view. A hostile territory between July and September this summer. Army Special Operations Command spokesman Mark Lestoria said soldiers would practice emerging concepts in special operations warfare in Texas. Does anybody believe the choice of venue here is an accident, by the way? Training exercise Jade Helm is going to assist our special operations soldiers in refining the skills needed against an ever-changing foreign threat. Among the planned exercises, soldiers will try to operate undetected amongst civilian populations, or infiltrate, in plain non-Romulan English, in some towns and cities where residents will be advised to report any suspicious activity they notice. In other words, flush out the subversives for future reference. Government reference, that is. As a means of testing the military's effectiveness, said county law enforcement officials who had been briefed by the Army. In other words, local law enforcement is in on the plot. They're going to set up cells. Cells! Their term, not mine. Cells. C-E-L-L-S, and I'm not talking about phones. They're going to set up cells of people and test how well they're able to move around without getting too noticed in the community, said Roy Boyd, chief deputy with the Victoria County Sheriff's Office. They're testing their abilities to basically blend in with the local environment and not stand out or blow their cover. Oh yeah, there's nothing at all suspicious about that, now is there? Here's a question to contemplate, folks. How does it enhance special ops training in foreign lands to attempt to infiltrate one's own country? Shouldn't the latter be vastly easier than the former? Don't they already know the language, the pop culture, the local slang, etc.? Hell's teeth, I would stand an at least decent chance of infiltrating the American Southwest, seems to me. The only way in which Rangers and SEALs and Delta Force guys at all could blow their cover is if they cause the locals to wonder what in the world they're doing, well, infiltrating their own country. Or, in other words, the Obama regime is taking a dry run at near-future martial law operations right out in plain sight. I know it sounds conspiratorial, but has training like Operation Jade Helm ever been undertaken before? I mean, if it has, I'm certainly not aware of it. And that brings us to Vladimir Putin's version of the Zimmerman telegram. Here's the quote from Newsweek. The Chechen parliament has threatened to send weapons to Mexico in retaliation to the U.S. Congress calling for defensive lethal aid to be sent to Ukraine. No, it's a resolution. It's never going to go anywhere. They don't really have to worry about it. But in response, Chechnya's parliamentary speaker, Dukhavaka Abdurakhimov, said that the U.S. has no right to advise Russia on how to behave with its neighbors. He warned that the supply of arms to Ukraine will be perceived by Chechnya, a southern Russian republic, as a signal to deliver new weapons to Mexico to resume debate on the legal status of the territories annexed by the United States. Abdurakhimov is referring to the states of California, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming. Gee, those states sound familiar, don't they? which Mexico surrendered to the U.S. in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, a peace deal which concluded the Mexican-American conflict. Abdurakhmanov said, "We reserve the right to conduct conferences in Russia, Mexico, and the U.S. to raise the question of breaking away the above-mentioned states from the U.S. and supplying weapons to resistance fighters there." Or tit for tat, as Barack Obama would call it. Now, of course, congressional Republicans can resolutionize all the livelong day and it won't accomplish anything, as Barack Obama will never, ever provide military aid to Ukraine. I mean, he believes the wrong side won the Cold War and Putin is entitled to take back the old evil empire, remember? But does anybody out there believe that only U.S. military aid to Ukraine will trigger Russian military aid to, say, the Mexican narco-terror networks? Or that this would constitute a crisis that Barack Obama would not eagerly exploit to bring about Mr. Abdurakhmanov's publicly stated objective? Does Fast and Furious ring any bells, ladies and gentlemen? And just think, it'll be taking place in full view, all of it, and the public at large will never know it. They'll never notice it. Call it a 21st century conspiracy. American Daily Review starts in 19 hours and 2 minutes at blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review. Join us tomorrow for that, and have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday, folks.